Imagine being pulled over for something you didn't do, confused, scared, and wondering how things escalated so quickly. In today's story, we dive into a shocking case of ego and power gone wrong. A police officer, driven by his own prejudice and arrogance, makes a life-altering mistake when he arrests the wrong woman. What starts as a routine stop quickly unravels into a mess of accusations, assumptions, and a refusal to admit fault. But this isn't just a story of injustice. It's about standing up for what's right. The woman, calm but determined, refuses to let the officer's mistake go unchecked. Her courage sets off a chain of events that exposes the cracks in a flawed system. Just when the officer thought his authority was untouchable, the tables begin to turn in a way no one saw coming. Stay tuned. This is a story you won't want to miss. The woman, a school teacher named Maya, had just finished a long day and was on her way home when the flashing lights appeared in her rearview mirror. Confused but cooperative, she pulled over, unaware her life was about to take a sudden turn. The officer, a man known around town for his heavy-handed tactics, approached her car with an air of authority that felt more intimidating than professional. Without much explanation, he claimed her car matched the description of one involved in a robbery earlier that day. Maya calmly tried to explain that she had been at work all day, even offering to show her school ID and call her colleagues to confirm. But her words fell on deaf ears. The officer, convinced he was right, seemed more interested in asserting control than listening. As the situation escalated, Maya's heart raced, not just with fear, but with disbelief. How could this be happening? As the officer insisted Maya step out of the car, her anxiety grew. She knew she had done nothing wrong, but the look in his eyes told her he wasn't interested in hearing the truth. She complied, trying to stay calm, but every move she made was met with suspicion. A small crowd began to gather at a distance, their whispers carrying a mix of confusion and concern. Some pulled out their phones, sensing this wasn't an ordinary traffic stop. Meanwhile, Maya's mind raced. She thought about her students, her family, and how easily this situation could spiral out of control. The officer began searching her car without her consent, determined to find something, anything, to back up his assumptions. But there was nothing. His frustration became obvious as he radioed for backup, claiming Maya was uncooperative, even though she had been nothing but respectful. One bystander, a local journalist, started recording everything. What he captured would later expose the cracks in the officer's story. But for now, Maya stood there, vulnerable, wondering how far this would go, and if anyone would believe her side of the story. As backup arrived, the scene became even more chaotic. Maya stood by her car, her hands trembling but her voice steady as she continued to assert her innocence. The officer, now emboldened by his colleagues, seemed more determined than ever to prove his case. He accused her of resisting and began questioning her aggressively, twisting her words to fit his narrative. Maya's frustration grew, but she refused to lash out, knowing that any misstep could make things worse. The crowd of onlookers grew larger, and the journalist who had been filming stepped closer. He started asking the officer questions. Why had Maya been stopped? What evidence did they have? The officer ignored him, but his discomfort was obvious. Maya noticed it too. It was a small crack in his facade, but she didn't dare hope it was enough. Then, just as tensions reached their peak, a voice crackled over the radio, a crucial update about the real suspect. All eyes turned to the officer as he froze mid-sentence. The officer hesitated, his hand hovering over his radio. The dispatcher had just confirmed that the actual suspect had been apprehended miles away, a suspect who looked nothing like Maya and drove a completely different car. For a moment, it seemed like the nightmare might finally end, but instead of admitting his mistake, the officer doubled down. He claimed Maya's behavior had been suspicious and insisted they needed to investigate further. The crowd, now fully aware of the injustice unfolding before them, began murmuring louder. Some demanded the officer let her go, while others called out the clear abuse of power. The journalist, still filming, pressed harder with his questions, pointing out the lack of evidence and the obvious bias. The officer, now visibly agitated, threatened to arrest anyone who interfered. Maya, standing her ground, felt a mix of anger and fear. She couldn't believe this was happening, even as the truth sat in plain sight. Then, as if the situation couldn't get worse, another officer arrived on the scene. But instead of diffusing the tension, he sided with his colleague, escalating things even further. Maya realized this wasn't just about one officer's ego. This was about a system refusing to admit when it was wrong. Just as the situation seemed irredeemable, a senior officer arrived on the scene, drawn by reports of the escalating confrontation. Observing the tension and the growing unrest among the bystanders, he approached Maya and listened intently to her account. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, he ordered the immediate release of Maya and apologized for the misconduct she had endured. The crowd's murmurs began to subside, and it appeared justice was finally being served. However, as Maya prepared to leave, the senior officer discreetly handed her a card, advising her to contact an internal affairs investigator. He revealed that this wasn't the first complaint against the arresting officer. There had been numerous allegations of misconduct and racial profiling. The senior officer confided that he had been gathering evidence to address systemic issues within the department, but lacked a credible witness willing to come forward. Maya faced a profound dilemma. She could walk away, relieved to have her freedom, or she could become the catalyst for change, challenging a deeply entrenched system. The weight of the decision pressed upon her, knowing that her choice could have far-reaching implications, not just for herself, but for her community and others who might face similar injustices. Maya took a deep breath and looked at the card in her hand. She knew staying silent would be the easiest path, but something inside her refused to let this moment pass without meaning. She decided to contact the investigator and share her story, knowing it could make a difference for others who couldn't stand up for themselves. The video recorded by the journalist spread quickly, sparking outrage online and drawing attention to the officer's pattern of behavior. In the weeks that followed, Maya's courage became a turning point. The officer was placed under investigation, and the department faced growing calls for accountability and reform. Maya didn't set out to become a voice for change, but her bravery inspired others to speak up as well. Though the road ahead was far from easy, Maya walked away from the experience stronger, knowing that sometimes standing up for what's right can change everything.